So here we are on another episode of the Closer to the Heart podcast with one of my, old time buddies, Matthew Runk. He obviously goes by Matt Runk or just Runk. And we've known each other since like fourth grade, so about over 20 years because we're a bunch of old men now. But yeah, so good to have you on,
Right.
man. And wanted to let everybody know who you are. Sounds like you've been digging into this new job with geology recently, right?
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to come on and see where you're doing with all this and get some fruits for
Yeah.
all the work you put into making the podcast. But yeah, my name's Matt Runk. I am a hydrogeologist by education, and I work for an environmental consulting company. So I go out into the field to different manufacturing sites, old paper mills, gas stations, and stuff like that. Even just farm properties that people have. And we go check for different levels of contamination to see if there's anything there in the ground that would make it an issue to like sell it to another property or have a company that wants to clean up the environment around what they're doing. So we go out and take a lot of soil samples, put in a lot of wells, take water samples, and try to make sure that there isn't anything dangerous in the
Right.
ground.
And
That's
so
gonna get
you
out
went
to other
to
people.
Western Michigan, right?
Yep, Western Michigan, and I graduated. I think in the fall of this
I
past
remember
year,
you got
2020.
hooked up with a job pretty quick, right?
Yeah, I was super blessed. I had some friends. We did a field training camp over the summer for my degree. It was 6 weeks, 5 days a week, 14 hours a day of just like concentrated topics every single week. Everything from hydrogeology in the ground to drilling to we did some geophysics and learned how to use different instrumentation to like see stuff in the ground without having to dig. And one of my classmates also was in his 30s, graduating with his bachelor's, and we kind of bonded right away as two of
Not
the
a
old
bunch of
dudes in the
20-year-old
class.
young bloods.
And
Yeah,
he,
we see life for what it is. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. We're like, wait a minute, we're on the same wavelength. We're rocking out projects together, and we're not really in the same cast as
Yeah.
all these other guys or younger kids coming through college. So he put me in touch with somebody that was looking for more workers for their company, and I got an interview I think 2 months before I graduated, and they offered me the job.
Yeah.
So I feel super blessed to have been locked down in
Totally.
employment.
Yeah, that's
before
super
I even
important,
graduated.
especially these days in the economy where things are at, to make those connections, to see to the next step immediately. I remember when I was in school for music, they kind of taught us everything except, make sure you're able to do something right out of school. And I'm sitting here with all this
Right.
excellent training, and then seeing, oh, I need to build a studio of students and start doing a whole bunch of auditions all of a sudden without the guidance of a teacher. And I made a lot of connections locally, but in music, obviously, it's a lot different. In a job like what you're doing, all the training you were doing probably were making sure to network with any kind of internship connections or people that came on site from various companies, I'd imagine, right? Yeah.
Oh yeah, anyone who came on and gave us trainings or demos, we always grabbed business cards. I always try to pull them aside and
Yeah.
have a conversation one on one, let them know who I was. That way, if my name slides across the desk one
I
day,
remember
they'll be like,
talking
"Oh,
to
I
him
think
at
I know
that
this
site
guy."
3 months back. Yeah.
The nice part too, yeah. The nice part too is a Western's field school
Yeah.
that I was talking about is like a unique setup where they actually train us on how to use the instrumentation, how to use the pumps, how to actually take samples. It's something called low flow sampling, where you make sure you're pulling water from the aquifer layer into a well casing
Wait,
instead of just
Can
sucking
you
the
give a little
water
more
out of the
detail
well.
on that? What did you call that?
And not
Low
having-
something?
Yeah.
Low flow. Okay.
It's called low flow. So you
Yeah.
think about it this way: if you have a tube of water in a well, right, and it's sitting a certain amount deep, and you turn on like the amount of water coming out of like your house hose,
Yeah.
and you just pull water out of it really, really quick, it'll pull all the water in the casing before it pulls water from the ground
I
because it's
see.
easier, right? It's the path of least resistance. And so if you pull the water that's been sitting for days or weeks or months out of this, PVC or stainless steel tubing, it's going to not have the same water chemistry as what's
Right,
sitting in the
because
rocks
the
just
steel
outside
is
of it.
leaching into
So-
the water. Yeah.
Exactly. Or, if there's any microbes, it's going to be a different temperature. Like stuff falls in from the top of the well, bugs get down in there.
Yeah.
Tons of stuff can change the chemistry of that water. So if you pull slowly, the idea is that you actually are pulling water from the outside of the aquifer in through the screen at the bottom of the well, because there's all these little slits. Think of it like a coffee filter, sort of. If you've ever had like a French press or like a metal coffee filter, it's a tube, a metal tube at the bottom with all these little slits. And it lets the water flow in through the bottom of the well and then get pulled up through the tube, so you get fresh water out of the aquifer. And all that kind of stuff is what we got trained on in that field course, which is directly applicable to the consulting work I'm doing. And talking to a lot of my colleagues, not many other colleges have that in-depth of a training program.
Yeah.
So
Western
shout out
Michigan
Western
University,
on that one,
low-key, has a bunch of really good undergrad programs that have a lot of scholarship opportunity. And if you live in state, obviously, it's a really nice choice. Shaving a lot off of your tuition.
Yes,
I remember for music, there's kind of a big thing where, we have Michigan State University, and we even have GVSU. I think Western Michigan's just kind of a better music school, but we have Michigan State University, and we have University of Michigan, or as we call it, U of M. And those are both Ivy League or, big state schools, essentially. And they have really, really good music programs that draw people from all over the nation. And so does Western. But, it kind of sits as a baby brother to those other two schools. But at the same time, I don't know if it's like this in your program, but you actually have a lot less postgraduates in the program at Western for music than you do at Michigan State and U of M. And what that means is that when you're in these big networking opportunity things that you can put on your resume, like being in these higher end ensembles like the Wind Symphony or the orchestra or principal chair in an orchestra, you're not competing with 7 doctoral students and 10 grad students for those seats as a freshman in college. You're not stuck in the lower ensembles until you're like maybe a senior if you're lucky. At Western, like I was performed pretty strong for where I was at as well, but I was only competing with one grad student who was the GA of the studio. So as a junior, like as a freshman, I was already in the orchestra playing second seat, sometimes principal seat on some pieces, and playing a lot of contrabassoon and getting that experience. And I already had 4 years of KJSO, Kalamazoo Junior Youth Symphony Orchestra. For those uninitiated, it's a youth orchestra, kind of like a something to help train and audition for college. So by the time I got out of college, I had 8 years of orchestral experience, and most of that was in the principal seats. And I had played most all the main repertoire and kind of like side repertoire of the entire classical, classical field as principal bassoonist on my resume before I even got out of undergrad. Whereas if I had been at that, if I had outcompeting the graduate assistant for the second one that came in for most of those cycles. But if I had been at Michigan State or U of M, I would have had access to, potentially in some way stronger connections when people come in to do what are called master classes and things like that, where visiting professors, it'll draw in, higher end talent outside on average for visiting, but and you have a kind of a more prestigious professor, you could say. But I'm getting a lot more opportunities for application and hands-on training than I ever would if I had been at those other schools. And it costs a lot less, too, depending on your scholarship. So I don't know if it was like that in your program, too, but that's kind of something I've noticed at Western a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, it was similar in a lot of ways. I feel like the music school is definitely bigger at Western than the geology school, but as I started going through it, there was a big influx of students. So the class that was like a year or so behind me when I was going through it, we only had maybe 12 kids per class, and they were pulling full 20, 24 kids per class towards the next ones under me. But as far as being able to interface and get a lot of those more professional opportunities, like going to seminars and giving talks and presenting information and research. Since I came in as more of like a non-traditional student, because I got my brewing associates from Kalamazoo Valley Community College, bounced around making beer around the country for a bit, out in like California and in Lansing and whatnot. When I finally came back to school for the geology to try and switch gears and get a little bit of a more stable pay or pay path. I didn't take advantage as much of more of those professional grade opportunities because I was just focused in on, hey, I got to get these classes done. I got to take as much as I can. I got to take as little time as I can to get through this so I can get back out in the working world. But there are definitely opportunities for research. And a lot of the classes were tailored towards making you a grad student. But like you said, there was only half dozen maybe of actual like master's and doctoral students that were working on long-term research. And some of them were among like a handful or like a half dozen academics working on a certain topic of rock study in the whole country. We're talking about, there's 10 people across the U.S. working on this one idea, and 3 of the 10 of them are at Western doing cutting edge research.
And that's a cool thing about being in a specific program. If you're interested in a research path long term, is figuring out who's doing your precise specialization. It's like going to a specific surgeon or specific section of the medical industry for a specialist for your problem if you have a very specific health problem, right? So yeah, like maybe might be one guy at the hospital over in Indianapolis or in Ann Arbor on U of M's campus who is actually trained and specialized in your specific problem, and you go like drive 250 miles to see this person, but ideas, if you're studying a specific field of research, that'll draw you to a specific school. But there's a lot of things that can change that. But I guess what I'm wondering here is, it sounds like that because of your aggressiveness in setting up those opportunities, and just making sure those people knew who you were, and trying to build those relationships, something ended up coming through, and now you cross the difficult gap, which is going from college to landing your first big job, right? So now you've been kind of in the field for a while, and I imagine training is a very different experience than what you learned in school. And just kind of walk us through what that was like, and for what you're doing on a daily basis, right?
Yeah. So the first, I think, 4 months or so were just here's our training drive on the computer system. Here's your laptop. Here's the people you got to talk to. We'll show you how to start setting up your Google Calendar and making sure you're filling your own schedule. But you got to read all these SOPs. You got to figure out how.
I'm a musician. We don't have those.
So you're just. This is how we do it. This is how you're supposed to sample stuff. This is how you get samples out of drums or standing water or in wells or grab soil, which was nice. So that took a lot of time and a lot of reading and a lot of on my own self-research, which was nice. And then through that, slowly but surely, I sort of work. I'm on an employee for the company, but I sort of operate as almost like a subcontractor. So I have to go out and talk to the different project managers that work at my company and say, hey, what jobs do you guys have? What do you need done? Where are the sampling events? And then they assign me or give me the information about the project they're trying to do, and I got to work out billing for, okay, this project is where I put my hours for what I did this week, and this project's where I do my hours for this week. And I sort of fill my own schedule as I go, which coming out of, the real structured nature of college or the real structured nature of like working as an hourly worker, I was like, wow, this is a whole bunch of freedom, but also a whole bunch of responsibility.
Which is what you asked for, but it's just not what you were trained for.
So I got Exactly. It's just it's those training wheels are off moment. I'm flying on my own wings, and I have to figure this out. If I just don't do what I need to do, I'm gonna be sitting behind a desk doing nothing all day. So people are gonna start asking questions. But slowly, I've made relationships with a few of the project managers. You do a good job on a couple projects here and projects there, and I got pulled into a large scale delineation, is what it's called, where you go out and you figure out what the lay of the land is, where the water table is, what kind of soils exist in the location you're working at. And it's a big 4-month project that we're on right now, for a very large manufacturing plant. So the solid work, huge hours, living out of hotels, but it's fun. It's not what I expected to be doing when I was graduating high school and trying to figure out where I was going to end up in the world. But
it sounds to me like you like the freedom that you have to make your own schedule. I know we're both people that you wouldn't do well being told what to do all day long. So, So it's a good
Oh,
personal
yeah.
fit in that way, and it sounds to me like depending on the deal that you're doing, you'll be out for a week at a time, or 2 weeks, or even 4 months. All completely booked. So it sounds like there's probably like a multi-million-dollar project going on right now, right? So tell us about that. What you can.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's like a 5 year.
Yeah.
It's like a 5 year. Yeah, it's a 5 year, about $5 million project to go out and sort of figure out where in this manufacturing factory is there any contamination, and then we're going to go through and we're going to put together a report that says, okay, is there stuff here? Is there not stuff here?
Yeah.
What does the lab say about the soil samples we've taken? And then we'll do a recommendation of like, hey, this is what we think should happen moving forward. Whether we just, if it's close to the surface, you can scrape it out and load it in trucks and take it to a landfill. And there's parameters around what can go in different landfills to make sure that stays safe so that it can sort of decompose on its own. Or whether you add microbes into the existing soil to have them eat up whatever kind of foreign fluids.
So
or
you're like
substances that exist
diagnosing
within
which
the soils.
microbes are already in the soil, or are you like reintroducing other microbes that should be there that aren't there, or because this sounds a lot like
It's sort of both ways.
the human gut in a way to me. Yeah.
It really is, and it's
Yeah.
another analog for like the same brewing stuff I did, right? Where you try to create an
Yeah.
environment where a certain microbe will thrive. So, like for example, when gasoline breaks down, it breaks down into like 2 or 3 different kinds of components. They all have nice acronyms, and it's like a separation, sort of like
Yeah.
oil and vinegar, just breaking into layers. Some of them are less dense than water and float on the top, and some of them are more dense than
Right.
water and sit to the bottom of the water table. And when you find out which ones those are and whether your environment in the soil has oxygen or doesn't have oxygen, you can introduce microbes that chew on and eat those sort of gasoline byproducts and break them down from a hazardous substance into a non-hazardous substance. So you essentially is doing the same thing I was doing in brewing, right? Where I made sugar water. You add in the bugs that make the beer, and then they chew up all the sugars and then make alcohol. Well, for this stuff, you have the whatever contaminant you have there, you can add in a microbe that chews on it.
So a big
and
part
breaks
of
it down
the
into a safer
diagnostic
product.
process of the, I guess, the soil, the water table, all the constituent parts existing in the environment. That's a lot of what your training is to make sure you can do that quickly and efficiently and cheaply, as cheaply as you can, but do it right. And then
Yeah, it's just compiling a whole bunch of notes and information. That way, people with more experience than me can sort of dig into it, help me understand it, so that I can learn over my career.
right,
we
and
can
then you
the
make
best
that recommendation.
for
That's
the
part of the
client.
consulting process. That's a lot of where your training from school comes into play. And then after that, you make a diagnosis of what microbes to introduce into the environment to digest the contaminants and to purify the system and make it a system that will sustain itself over the long term. I don't know if you're, kind of curating the topsoil or any other kind of part of the process, or just give me more details about that side of things. Sounds like it's not only microbiomes you're trying to foster or create or introduce.
Yeah. It's not all microbiomes. A lot of it too is like, so some soils, it's easier for like liquid to transport through than others, right? If you have sand on the beach, more water is going to move through it than if you have like a clay layer or, a hardly packed silt layer where there's no room in between the soil grains for water to move through, right? Or if it's like granite where it's solid and there's no way for it to pass. So while we do look for like, where the contamination is, we're also looking at the lithology, the lay of the land, what layers of rock and dirt exist within the ground. And so we can tell, hey, this is where the water level is on this spot. This is where the water level is on this spot. This is the direction that the water will flow underground. So if there's contamination here, it's going to move that way. And so you can put in clay barriers under the ground. You can put in monitoring wells to see, is it actually moving that direction? And you can say, okay, is this contaminant something that's going to stay on the property and not move, where we can contain it and treat it slowly? Or is this something that we need to do something big right here, right now, because it's going to move? in 5 years, it could end up off property. And sometimes
Right.
there's a residential zone across the street. Sometimes there's farmland across the street, and you don't want it to get over there. So that's part of our diagnosis, is going, okay, where is stuff that's areas of concern? What needs to be treated immediately, and what's something that we can sort of wait a little bit on, it'll stay here, not go anywhere. And a big part of that is clay layers, because clay is the biggest barrier for water motion that exists naturally.
Very
Especially here in Michigan.
hydrophobic.
There's lots of clay everywhere.
Yeah.
Very hydrophobic. And one thing they use clay for is, so if there's like nuclear waste that gets buried underground, when they finally like take it from reactors and stuff, they'll put it in lead containers so the radioactive particles don't get out, and then they'll seal it with like a foot of clay on every side, because it'll take hundreds of years for anything to leach through the clay because of how hydrophobic it is.
I would imagine you're trying to introduce new active components into the ecosystem as seldomly as possible, right? So you don't have like a bunch of clay,
right? If you can avoid it
on the company payroll, just sitting in a warehouse somewhere to introduce, right, to redirect the water. Yeah,
right. That's the company works a lot with subcontractors, so we find other companies that do a piece of the puzzle and put them all together in the project. We're just sort of the overseers and the data collectors, and the boots on the ground, saying, okay, this is the direction the whole project's trying to move in, and we want to make sure that people out there helping us with the physical labor are doing the right things and understand the process. So it's nice, because I get to have both the office side of things, where I'm doing Excel sheets and making reports and typing stuff up and sending emails to people and having meetings, but I also have the boots on the ground side, where I'm out there shoulder to shoulder with drillers or construction workers, and we're looking at stuff and pulling dirt out of the ground, and I'm out there sweating in the sun, getting
your vitamin D,
sunburned,
baby.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, right, it's both sides of it. I'm not just an office guy. Oh, he's just a college graduate, and because there's a stigma about that especially between drillers and geologists, where some people think, oh, I went to college, like I'm the one that knows stuff, I'm smart. These guys didn't go to college, like they're
white collar
just
versus
out
blue
here
collar
as contract workers.
Yeah.
And I definitely, I try to break that, because the thing is some of these guys have been drilling for 20, 30 years, and they can tell you what soil layer they're in based on the vibrations from their machine. Right, it shakes harder the denser the ground is. Like these guys know their stuff. And I always default. I'm like, hey, I'm not going to I'll tell you what I think about it, but I want to know what you guys say too, because you guys have huge untapped expertise sometimes. That really should be on the table, and it goes a long way. You show a little bit of respect to people, and you get a lot back. And
not being the guy who's like, I'm 22 and I know what I'm doing, and some of those guys have literally been drilling longer than their supposed bosses have been alive, so
absolutely. And
I was just going to say, on top of that,
go ahead.
that built-in just felt expertise, that tactile expertise is going to tell you, and experience is going to tell you far more than that education will. That education can help predict problems that maybe that kind of felt experience wouldn't maybe wouldn't require certain trial and error to find those conclusions, but you're gonna, both of those paths are gonna cross each other as experience happens over time, and one of these parties has the experience, the other doesn't. I also just I've worked with a lot of blue collar folks over the years, not in like HVAC and construction. I'm definitely a bit of a white collar boy through and through, but worked a lot of restaurant jobs, things like that, and you wouldn't want to see me in a kitchen. My brain, I'm a little too white. Yeah. Right. I look really
it's a different
stupid
animal
in the
entirely.
kitchen, I'm not gonna lie. So, I've had a lot of blue collar folks that I've known, been pretty close to over the years, and there's just a certain different way their brains are kind of wired and skill set to where they're just far more attuned to those kinds of problems, and it's good that you value both sides of the equation. Yeah.
Oh, definitely. Because that's the thing too, is drilling is one of those trades, sort of like like plumbing or electrician work, where everybody, as we went through high school, told us, oh, you got to go to college, you got to get a degree, right? You got to go get your bachelor's.
Starting
you
to
won't make it
fall
without
off.
it. And so there's a real there's a real shortage. The gap between the generations that have been drilling all over the country for, you know, decades and decades, they're getting in their mid to late 60s. They're getting ready to retire. And so a lot of the young guys are between, you know, like 22 and 30. And there's hardly anybody in between. So there's definitely an issue where they're trying, the trade is trying to get people in there now, for these young guns that can learn from the veterans before they retire, or else the knowledge is just going to get lost. And it's like every house, I mean, if you're not on city water, every house needs a well. If you want to put in a new town somewhere, you need a central well system. Like, it's a necessity for
there's a certain level of job security
communities.
that's there, especially now that demand is so high and supply is so low, right? Because of the culture that's been created. And, you know, we can talk about, you know, how that might be planned or whatever, and you know, who knows. But I would say that it's like there's a conscious effort there, but kind of not to derail things too much. But
it's not it's not an organic thing by any means. I mean, even if it's not a concerted effort, it's because, you know, our generations and the ones around us got told, like, you can't go to trade school, you got to go to college. Like, and so the focus of where people
Hick
went.
person, if
but
you
these
don't
drillers,
go to college,
they make six figures.
And
But these drillers make six figures, man. They make good money, but you got to travel around, and you got to deal with the sound and the vibration. It's hard work outside, but it's lucrative, man. If I had known that I could have been a driller, I don't think I ever would have went back to college, if I'm being honest. Like, it's a lot of fun, and you're right in the same vein of work that I'm doing.
There's a lady I've dated pretty extensively. You know, she's interested in doing like HVAC work or like welding work, because, you know, you do a certain prescribed amount of training that doesn't destroy your wallet like college does, and you can jump right in and start making $28, $32 plus dollars an hour doing stuff that people need done and that there's not a whole lot of people doing. And you can build that skill and that trade over time, and those skills can translate well into other sections of blue collar work, like construction or different types of HVAC, or, you know, drilling, or whatever it is that you'd like to do, or, you know, try doing. You know, and there's someone else I've known who, you know, he works on a quarry for like 65, 70 hours a week, just, you know, mining, but, you know, he brings home $90K a year. So, like, you can make good money doing this stuff.
Right.
And people are wondering how am I going to make money out of college. You know, you do some, thankfully, music is technically a set skill set that you are learning, and it's like a tactile element to it that grounds it in reality. But when you're working with just, you know, some abstract historical studies or something like that, or, you know, of course, like gender studies or whatever, what happens is, you know, you're studying something that has barely any direct practical utility to the world, and so you're literally depending on a system that, you know, with associate professorships, where you're patching together multiple part-time jobs that have no health insurance or other benefits, right? Whereas, you know, instead of paying sometimes over six plus digits just to start work, you could literally pay for maybe 5 digits, sometimes 3 digits, to get a skill set over a couple of months that you'll be able to start paying, you know, hard bills with 60, 70K plus right away. So, and these are jobs that the whole economy and the stability of especially real estate, let alone whether that's residential or professional with businesses, or, you know, or just, you know, surveying land, like, these are going to be positions that we will need forever. So, like, they're not going away. So there's a lot of job security there. It's just reputation that is getting in the way. So, you know, yeah,
it's a driving force, and like social stigma towards it, and just the ideas of people, which I do think is changing. I think a lot of people don't really care how you make money or what the thing is. I think the focus is moving more towards how you live your life outside of what you do to sort of make it and pay your bills, which is a nice change of pace. I never really liked the idea that, like, you're defined by your job, right? What you do for a living is your value as a person, because there's so much.
And what you do is just, you know, kind of like an extended hobby of sorts. You know, if you have like a grand purpose you want for, you know, where you want to go, like, you don't have to be that kind of person, but maybe you just want to help out your local community. Maybe you just think this thing is interesting and it pays the bills, and you want to do a good job at it, you know?
Yeah,
But
exactly.
there's a lot more to people
But
than just the work they do.
no, it's cool.
That's for sure. But
Definitely.
yeah,
Definitely.
bit of a fun little tangent there. I could tell me a little bit more about this project that you're doing, right? So like just specifically what the needs are for like this bigger kind of project, because I imagine there's a lot more subcontractors involved than in the normal type of project. So it kind of would get a little more into the weeds of the application of what you're doing, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so we've got labs that we contract out to do soil testing for different components. And we have some drillers out there which are doing, it's called geoprobe pushing. It's taking about a 3-inch in diameter metal cylinder and pushing it down to the ground 4 feet at a time. And inside it's got a plastic sleeve. And as the cylinder gets pushed down, soil comes up through the sleeve in the middle, and they pull the sleeve out from the ground and then hand it over to me, and then I can characterize the soils from there. And that's how we do it, push by push, and figure out where we want to go, or how deep we want to go, what we're looking for, and are able to see what's in the ground that way. But it's a lot of interfacing, right? Because there's like a management company that looks over the manufacturing site, and then there's us out there, and then we have the subcontractors under us. So it's a lot of logistics between like 2, 3, 4 companies. Like everyone's got vacation days, different people work different hours. So it's a lot of communicating between, the boss of this
Sounds
company,
like there's
the
a
boss
lot
of this company, the boss
of
of this company.
overhead that could slow a project down in a situation like that. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and especially when I work with two other coworkers on this project, and 2 of us go out at a time, and so every week one of us is cycling off, and then you stay for 2 weeks and then cycle out with the next person that's coming in. Excuse me, tickle in my throat. So being able to like transfer information between teams that are going out and teams that are staying back, and being able to communicate to who's not on site that week to be like, hey, we need this stuff, or we need to place this order. We're out here in the field working 62 hours a week. You're in the office, maybe having 1 or 2 jobs in the field to try and just keep your billable hours up, but you'll probably have more time than we will. Can you place this order for us? So yeah, that's been one of the biggest hurdles, has been doing that. And then also the billing aspect of it, right? Where I'm getting invoices from companies sent to my work email, and I've got to send those up the chain to accounting and like get billing stuff open so that they can make sure that they process to pay people on time. So I've been working through that, because as with any great company, the training is not always ubiquitous, right? I get a lot of training for what I'm doing, but not every nook and cranny is explained to you before you get there. So it's a lot of learning on the fly and being like, oh shoot, I've got 2 invoices outstanding. Like, let me go try to talk to this person, go talk to this person. And my company's international, or not? It's international. So sometimes the person that knows how to do what I'm trying to do doesn't even work in our state. They're out in Colorado somewhere. So I've got to work with time zones and send Teams calls and be like, hey, can you help me with this? Because you're the only person in 5 states.
That's a big part of my job. Is
right?
Like for instance, I'm working with like 5,700 customers, and like 1,200 of them live in the Pacific time zone, and like let's say 2,500 of them live in the Eastern time zone, and like 500 of them live in the Mountain time zone because nobody lives there, which is a plus or a minus depending on who you are. but yeah, I'll like only have like a list of Eastern time zone people to call out from like 9 to 10 a.m. And then I'll like move on to the Central time zone once it becomes 9 a.m. over there at 10 a.m. Eastern time. And so there's a lot of, when you're the playmaker trying to organize the people, there's a lot of organizing schedules in that way. And once it gets handled in bulk like that, generally a company will have like an internal software to help manage that.
That would be nice, but hey, well, maybe one day,
you
right?
just gotta read the footer on the email and say, oh, it's from Colorado.
Click the team's profile and be like, oh, okay, they're out in California. I got to wait a couple extra hours, or send an email and know that over lunch I'm probably going to get a call back.
Whereas
so
we have a software called 4D that a lot of companies use. It's a French company, and that software will literally do all of that organization by zip code automatically for you, and as well as a whole bunch of other things.
That's nice.
Yeah. So when you're dealing with clients in bulk, that's usually something that's going on, but. For a company like what you got, probably working with like 5 or 10 people schedules on most smaller jobs. Yeah.
Yeah, probably the most for the smaller jobs. I think across the country there's like
Yeah.
at least 15 to like 2,500 people. But you don't work with everybody. But that does give the opportunity, right? If I wanted to go work in, Carolina or Colorado or, Utah, right? If there was a project that got posted out there and I wanted to go, I thought it was really interesting, or they were doing a certain kind of remediation or cleanup that used a certain technology that I was interested in. I could go out there and say, hey, I want to work on this job. Let me clear my schedule. Let me offset my responsibilities that I have in the upcoming months, and I'm going to go spend 6 weeks out of state, living out there in hotels and whatnot, and learning on the job there. And all the while, I'm racking up project hours for hopefully one day being able to be a project manager, right? There's a project manager training certification that you can get, that you need a certain number of hours on projects before you can take the class to do the test. And then I have what's called a geologist in training exam that I can do, which is sort of like an engineer in training for those that know about the certification, the post education certification process for engineers.
Be a lot of people who don't.
I have to go and
you could get a little detail on that.
Yeah. So I'll speak more to mine, because the engineer one is similar, but it's its own thing, and I'm not an engineer. So for the geologist in training, I have to go. Certain states require you to have what's called a professional geologist license in order to sign off on these reports that we make, to say, hey, I'm certified by the state as a geologist. I understand what's going on, and I've read through this and say that everything within it is true, right? This follows my knowledge and what the industry standards are. And so part of that process is I have to do, I think right after college, because you have 2 to 4 years worth of experience that counts from there, you can take a geologist in training exam in certain states. Michigan doesn't require it, but places like Indiana do. So I can go down there to take the exam. And once you have your certification in one state, you have to just take a transfer exam to move it to other states. Everywhere but California, because they have 2 3 layers, because they're pretty specific out there, right? There's not as much water, so they're really strict about making sure that people that are working with the hydrology and the groundwater and stuff know what they're doing. So I have to apply to a governing board to say, hey, I want to take this exam. Here's how much time I've spent. Here's my degree. Will you let me take the test? And they say, yeah, sure. Pay us $150 or whatever. And you send them off the money, get a test day, go take a full it's almost like an SAT style exam with different sections and different topics. Everything from hydrology to mineral composition, to doing different flow calculations for how much water is going to move through this kind of soil if these are your parameters, right? And if you pass that exam, then you get your geologist in training certification, sort of the first step to say you're on the path. Then if I work in the field for 5 years at various jobs, I can apply for my professional geologist license. And then I take a secondary test on that side of thing that's less information and fundamentals and more like project management and industry standard style questions, a lot of more regulatory information, knowing what laws exist in what states around different things that you do, because there's all sorts of government top-down requirements that we have to do in order to operate. And then if I get that certification passed, then I can sign off, like I said, on the project and say, hey, I approve this stuff, which gives you a fast track to being a project manager, because they want every company that does this stuff has to have at least one person on staff that's licensed if they're that's working in these states that require the licenses to say, hey, I sign off on a project. We can send this out.
So that we can hunt somebody's head if things go south.
So
yeah.
Exactly. And like I said, engineering does a similar thing where it's like for construction, you start out as a trainee and then you do, I think, 3 years from what my coworkers have told me. And then you can take your test afterwards. Yeah. But don't quote me.
Yeah.
It's not my field. It's just what I've heard.
So, I mean, it sounds like there's a pretty structured process for promotion, essentially. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Whereas, it depends on what kind of job you have. If there's not that type of structure, it's just what type of experience you have and how well you can advertise that experience and how well you can execute on that experience in an interview and demonstrate it. So those are all obviously important skills, but there are literal exam barriers in place for this. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's like 35 out of 50 states require a license. Like I said, California requires a double layer license. So it's a nice thing to have. It gives you a lot of flexibility. And that is the other nice thing about my job is that, everywhere needs this. So I don't have to stay where I'm at now in Michigan. I can, if I want to be in another state and I see a good opportunity.
Yeah, your experience is
work,
accumulating to a point
there.
where it allows you to have more choice over where you're situated, especially as you build your training and qualifications. And so that's also just a natural consequence of working in a field for a while. And just doing any managerial, job also allows you to be a general manager in any other field you want to. So, the experience compounds on itself over time and opens up your flexibility. But you know what they say, it's like your first home isn't your forever home, right? Or maybe it is, if you really like where you're at. But it doesn't have to be, which is, a freeing thing to realize. So, but as far as the training goes in music, well, not music, specifically, in music sales, like higher end stuff, there are big things going on where we deal with our own form of installs where we have like an integrations team that we can get, send out to help people with a job. And that's obviously a lot of extra money because there's overhead to, put these people up in hotels, pay for the installation costs and the labor as well as the gear, right? And the integrations team is all like partially diagnosing what's going on the ground, and then working directly with the sales engineer, who's like the Sweetwater point of contact, right? And then depending on if you're working with a high-end console, some of these live consoles go up to 30, 50K, 100K plus just for the console, right? So that's not including all the other costs I just mentioned, not to mention the cabling that runs through, which depending on what you're working with can be another about 1 or 2K just for the cabling right there or more. And then also the stage boxes down the road, that's another, many, many Ks. And also, every individual component and piece. And if we're doing any work to help renovate the space, that's another huge. So these projects can get up to $1 million plus to, for like a big like church renovation or for a studio build or something like that. We're installing a whole bunch of custom acoustic treatment for the space, right? They could be working directly with like 4, 5, 6, 7 different small companies that are integrated with Sweetwater. And so there are trainings for the consoles to be certified to sell them, right? So I had to do trainings, like general trainings for live sound consoles and for recording studio consoles, which are 2 separate tests, and then an integrations test. And I also had to do individual tests for each brand and model of console. So, and then there's like,
does one, I was gonna say, if you worked for like one company and you were like certified with them, does another company look at that as like a plus where they like let you in easier, or is it like from the ground up everywhere?
Yeah, and you have to retake the tests because you might learn about the Allen Heath D-Live ecosystem, and then 16 months later you finally get a deal where one might come up. And last time I checked, if I learned about a console or if I learned about a concept and had to execute it at a critical overhead level 16 months later, I'm probably going to need a refresher, right? Yeah,
I'm going to need a little brush up, right?
Yeah, I'm not going to remember the details of how to program the EQ on that D-Live 16 months later, right? So you're not expected to product train, but at the same time, you're expected to be able to build out the system correctly because they're they tend to be pretty modular at a high level. So you get a lot of detail about their very specific needs, lock them in the Sweetwater ecosystem, make sure they're going to commit to us, take care of them, and build out. You're probably going to be writing a different set of SKUs for stage boxes and for the mixer. And for the peripherals for every single client who ever buys a D-Live. So it's very specialized like that. And so the training process will accrue for stuff like that. But, if you're selling someone a $600 keyboard, you don't need, specialized training for that, right? You just need to know your way around the keyboard market and know what's good for them and why. And I can usually steer someone toward the right keyboard in about 5 minutes. So...
Right. And it definitely behooves you as a sales guy to know the ins and out of these components, to know how they fit together, what kind of things they can and can't do to be able to build the right product line.
Because it's like if someone's trying to sell you a car and they can't tell you the horsepower on the car that you're buying, you going to buy it for that guy?
Yeah, all of a sudden a flag goes up. You're like, wait a minute,
Yeah,
does this guy know
exactly.
anything about this car? What
Then you're
else?
like,
Don't they know?
I'm about going up Shit's Creek without a paddle right now. I don't like it. So, you know.
Right. I'm gonna get a lemon out of this.
Yep.
I'm gonna have all sorts of problems, or I'm not
So
gonna have.
there is an emotional and intellectual component to the sales process, but also to the consulting process, because consulting is basically kind of a commissionless form of sales in a way. Right, it's just like almost like a salaried form of sales. Like I'll tell customers like I'm basically your personal consultant, right? So,
yeah, you're trying to sell the idea that you bring value to what they're doing, and you're gonna be able to help them walk down a path to fix a problem that they have, or you know, get to a sale on a property, because that's the big thing that we work with is, you know, if someone's gonna sell a property, the way the law works, whoever owns it is responsible for any contamination, right? So when the bank says we're going to give you a loan to buy this property, the bank's the one who technically owns it. So the bank doesn't want to pay to clean up anything that's wrong on that property while they happen to own it while you pay back your mortgage. So they bring us out to check it out and see like, hey, make sure this is good. Are we going to lose?
They're not willing to loan out that money
here?
And determine the interest rates on that money that they're loaning until they know the diagnosis of the land. I'm sure there's a very structured SOP for that with the banks before any money is lent.
Yup.
Yeah.
They said, check this out. Let us know what's here. And if there is anything, then we're going to sell them all sorts of insurance. That way, if there is a cleanup, it doesn't come out of our pocket. It comes out of the insurance pocket.
It's kind of cool to see how all the layers integrate with each other between, your specific type of work, and also just the standard, costs of living that we take for granted, like car, house, food, groceries, insurance, utilities. Is also why generally the salespeople who are in kind of these drier, more universal like needs. Some of them are needs, some of them are needs, like insurance, right? But we're forced to need them, right?
Exactly.
But like you can't hop on the road these days without a car insurance. I remember back when we were in high school, it was technically a choice, but now it's like legally required to have insurance in most states, if not all states, to even be on the road to begin with. Yep. Like if you get pulled over and you don't have insurance, like you don't want to be in that position.
It's not good. It's not good. You're going to have a very upset police officer outside your window.
You may or may not have a court date of some sort. So, yeah. Yeah, you're going to talk to someone you didn't want to talk to on a Saturday morning. Put it that way. So, but being in these drier, need-based industries, it tends to be far more lucrative, especially insurance, especially business-to-business insurance, business-to-business stock options. Like some of these people make like $500,000 in like the first year or two at the job.
Oh yeah. And they're just facilitating regular business, right? They're just the middleman in the process that connects person A to service B. And
at the same time, as you get to these bigger deals, even in music, like it's very rare that someone's going to spend over $5,000 on stuff and not talk to a person extensively before doing it, right? And especially for these consoles I was talking about, like. No, you're never going to see a batch client order for an Avid S4 console or S6 console, okay? No one's going to drop 100 bands on a console on the website. It's never going to happen. They're going to want to talk to someone who
it just trickles through one day.
Can keep up perfectly fine with someone who's been in the industry doing this stuff for 25 years on the ground, who can talk directly to them about their options and knows like 3 or 4 or 5 specialists to connect them with to answer their tweakiest questions on the individual console. Like we have like monitors, we have individual studio monitors reps, we have specific like brand reps for like individual brands for the consoles that people can talk to. So like we have a whole we come prepared. So and that's the type of stuff that moves those big deals. So there's always that human element that's needed, and it's not just someone sitting in a chair happening to take 20% of the money that goes across for the company, right? It's the
click.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, this was nice today.
Yeah.
I worked real hard, got all this stuff through because I clicked on my screen.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's never that easy, right? That's the dream. And 1 in a million it happens where everything, the stars align. You get someone working at a university that's just replacing the equipment they
Yeah.
use for, however many years. And they're just like, all right, this is a low interaction style. This is what
Yeah.
I want. I know what it is.
Yeah,
Can you hook me up?
sometimes
Boom.
people just
In and
know
out
their
the door,
needs.
right?
Like a school
But
just
I-
knows.
I-
They've been talking about this for like 4 to 6 months, and they just come to you with a purchase order
Yeah.
for like $20,000. That does happen once in a blue moon.
Yeah, this is what I've
But that's the exception, not the rule. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's the icing on the cake, right?
Yeah.
That's like, oh, whew, all right, we got one. This will
Yeah.
make up for a couple of the other harder
And even when that happens,
conversations
it
that
takes
didn't
like
come
30
through,
to 45
right?
minutes to put the
So-
purchase order together, in our software, make sure you know where everything is in and out of stock, and you usually have to hit
Right.
up like 3 or 4 different reps in-house to figure out when things are coming in stock, find substitutions, because no one ever just gets a bunch of stuff in stock on the site. They always want something that's not going to be there for like 4 months. So, you know what I mean? So...
And then why isn't it here? I need this
Well,
today.
well,
It's
Mr.
like,
Customer,
well,
it did say
come
on
on,
the
man, there's
site that there's an
logistics here.
extended ETA on this item here. So, yeah, but yeah, so
Right.
there's a lot of details to sort out there.
man.
But I mean, it sounds to me like a thing. Like, I guess what common problems do you encounter for the soil or for the flow of the estuaries of the rivers, or any other constituent parts of the environment that you're in? What are the most common problems that you encounter that people might want to know about, before buying a house there? Or yeah.
Right. I mean, a big one that's common in the industry is like underground storage tanks, right? And there was a big craze in the past where like if you had an oil or like a gas heating system in your house, right, and an old home, they didn't want to have a big gaudy metal holding tank sitting on the ground in your backyard. So they thought, well, that's a great idea. We'll just put it in the ground, right? We'll dig a big hole. We'll take this steel case full of, burning oil or natural gas or gasoline, and let's just put it in the ground. That way no one has to look at it. Well, then 40, 50 years went by, right? And this is something that happened at gas stations a lot, right? They have underground storage tanks for all their stuff, but they made them out of like iron and steel. And this stuff corrodes over time because of rain and because of what's inside of it. So you get a corner of it that's a little bit more thin and a little bit of the gas.
I don't want any
every time
gas
they
in my
refill
drinking
it.
water,
All
personally.
right. And so that's the
Yeah.
kind of,
Yeah.
right? So it's a hard thing to look at. And so that kind of stuff happens, wastewater. There's a lot about
PFAS?
what's PFAS nowadays. I think it's PFAS, perfluoral, non-aqueous. I
What does
forget
it
what
mean?
the acronym stands for off the top of my head. So PFAS is a chemical or a compound that's for like Teflon or nonstick stuff, or they put it in like firefighter equipment for fire retardant sprays. And it's something that's sort of stuck to everything, and it sits between the air-water barrier on the top of the water tables, and it's super, super soluble. The only way they've really found, to my knowledge, to get it out is to use bubbling apparatuses to bubble water and to make it get in these thin films and be able to pull the bubble foam out as the only place to remove it from the water. But it's something that doesn't break down, and it's in everything because like Teflon
yes.
is something that in the production process and in the
Yep,
use
and-
has PFAS in it, right? And a lot of impellers for water pumps are made out of Teflon. So there's a lot of testing going around to figure out, is this stuff actually
Teflon's
harmful to
literally
people?
made out of
What are the side
fluoride.
effects? Is
Yeah,
this
which is a uranium compound, so it's
Yeah,
probably pretty
so-
harmful. There are whole books on that. It is harmful.
Yeah, so the testing is still
Yeah.
yeah. The testing for it is still not fully conclusive to my knowledge, but it's something that a lot of municipalities are looking into and saying, hey, we need to look at this and stay ahead of the curve. Because a big part of it is like people's wastewater, right? You get a wastewater treatment plant, everybody pumped their water to one central zone, they condensed it, cleaned it, and then they had their effluent or what they pumped out of the wastewater treatment plant as their offshoot material that a lot of times just goes to wetlands or back into the environment because there's nowhere else to put it. And when you concentrate everybody's water like that, what you're doing is you're concentrating the little trace amounts of PFAS in all the water into one central
as if they're
area,
not toxic enough
right?
on their own.
And so sometimes, exactly. The nice thing is it seems like reverse osmosis units that go ahead and pull everything out of your water, like what my folks had growing up with my water that always
dad
tasted
had
so good at all
reverse
of our
osmosis
sporting
in the
events.
house in Old Line. Yep.
That seems to just blow it right out of the water, no problem. So that's been a good one. So that's sort of the new age. That's the new craze, right? Like what was it? CFCs back when we were growing up, that were melting the ozone from refrigerant, right? And there's this is today's like scare chemical almost, where it's like, okay, well, we got to figure out where this is, how to deal with it, where it is. But it's one of those where you got to be real careful. You use special water for the testing that doesn't have PFAS in it. That way you're not contaminating your sample. Like, you're using water that's got it in it. And then you're testing. It's like, well, now it's there anyway, but was it really in the soil in the first place? Or is it in the water you used for the medium?
And the control sample is contaminated just to make sure they can pass it through, the FDA.
Exactly.
That definitely doesn't happen, by the way. Don't research that. But PFAS stands for per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. Yeah.
That's the one.
And also, by the way, it says fluoro in it for fluoride. So per and poly, multiple fluoroalkyl substances. So yeah, that's when you see those Brita filters and it says they're taking out fluoride, that's a real thing. There's fluoride in the tap. But right.
Yeah. That's a nice thing too, because one of the ways that one of the technologies they use to contain PFAS spills, right? So if a fire breaks out somewhere, right, and the firefighters come and they spray the fire foam on everything, like that's got tons of it in it because the chemical works really well for stopping fires. And then all of that leaches into the ground, and if you have like a plume that's moving in a certain direction on the top of the water, if you drill holes in the ground and fill it full of activated carbon, it'll actually leach. The organic style soil will bind up the PFAS. The PFAS loves it. It sticks right to it like glue. And so you'll get an area where it's easier for the water to flow through the ground. You'll have the plume move towards these basically Brita filters that you stuck in the ground, and it grabs it all up, and then you can pull it and send it to get processed and cleaned up at like a more specialized like waste cleanup facility. And then just keep replacing the carbon in the ground, literally just like Brita filters. It's a cool analog that I learned in my classes about how it works. And I was like, is this how this actually works? Is it just like a big Brita filter in the ground? And my doctorate professor was like, yeah, that's exactly how it works.
Activated
it's really
charcoal, right? It's using.
No, it's more like organic style. There's a couple different compounds that you can use, but it's like a high organic style soil where you mix it in.
I would be curious about the exact constituent components of that filter. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my hand. That's sort of one of those technologies I touched on and was exposed to. But that's when I was talking about, hey, if there's a project somewhere in the country that's working with something specific and cool, that's what I have my ear to the ground for that kind of stuff. Because if I can actually have boots on the ground for some of this emergent technology and people tackling these new ideas, it's going to make me even more valuable.
And I just kind of wonder if there's a company in your field that just buys activated charcoal in bulk, because I forget exactly what the size of it was, but like a dime or like a quarter sized piece of activated charcoal has enough porous surface area to cover a football field. Which sounds fake.
Wow.
But it's
crazy.
Real.
Like actual surface. But when you think about every single side of every grain inside of it, the total surface area of the whole thing across every single grain in the piece of material. And it's got a lot.
You probably noticed, after a fun Saturday night that we had a while back when you had some activated charcoal pills, probably felt a little better,
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, they were nice. It's been an interesting set of conversations
Yeah.
watching you and David go back and forth about
excited to-
nutrition and vitamins and how to get the best
Yeah.
out of what you're taking
I'm-
for yourself. And
I'm
your
trying
own
so
body
hard
health.
not to write
That's
like
been-
a 3,000-page essay when he responds. I'm going to save it for next week.
right. Just
But
yeah, keep it
Yeah.
in the soundbite format. Hit them with the shorts. You know, it's attention span.
Yeah. David's ahead of the
generation.
curve on the attention span generation.
Right.
Yeah.
No, it's nice though, because the one hard part about living out of
Yeah.
hotels, right, is staying healthy and like making your own food. You know, because I get a stipend for food each day, and I think one of the drillers came up to me like the 4th or 5th week we were out there, and he's
Yeah.
like, "Dude, what are you doing for food?" And I was like, "I'm cooking my own meals at home, right? I'm meal prepping rice and chicken and vegetables and salads, and I'm bringing it all out. I bring like
Yeah.
10 containers of
Probably have like
meal
a
prep
big
food out there to the
ice,
hotel
you
in a
know,
big old
like
bag.
a party tray for like on the
Yeah.
river, but it's just got a bunch of chicken and salads and stuff in it. Yeah.
Exactly, and I'm just tossing it all in the mini fridge. He's like, "Dude, I've just been eating out at like a restaurant every day because like my company covers it." He's like, "I can't keep doing this though.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sick of eating out.
Uh-huh.
I can't do this every day anymore." So it's hard. So gym memberships, trying to meal prep, trying to watch what I eat. You know,
Yeah.
it's a hard
Just getting
thing.
the system
out here,
down
but
is the
trying to
trickiest
stay
part.
healthy.
Once you can just follow the system, it just builds itself, right? People are
Yeah.
creatures of habit, and they like doing what they're used to, and so the
Exactly.
trick is to be conscious of what you want to be used to, right? And to care enough about that process
Exactly.
to generate the right long-term results, because it's actually, easy to get fit. It's easy to get healthy. It's not, but it is. The idea is you just need to be intentional about building the right system that you enjoy,
Yeah.
and that you will continue doing, and make a system.
Right. The components are simple. The information is out there. Putting together a regimen. It's about doing it every day,
Yep.
being consistent, always doing that stuff. Not
Well, you
cheating
could
from
cheat
your
every once in a
patterns,
while
right?
and have
That's
a
the
little
hard
fun,
part,
but
though.
there are exceptions to the rule.
Yeah, but-
right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. Find one thing at a time, adding it to it, and once it sits in my repertoire, it's in my wheel well, it's in my pattern. Like,
That's-
okay, let
that's
me
a good
add
way
one
to go
more
about
thing.
it.
Let me add one more thing, rather than I'm going to revamp my whole diet, my whole lifestyle, everything I eat, everything I do. I'm going to take these 20 extra vitamin supplements, and we're going to do it
2
all
weeks later,
starting
you're gonna be
Monday,
like,
bro.
"F
We're going
this,
to get it,
I'm
and
out."
it's going to go. Yeah, I'm done.
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot. Oh, I fell off the
there's
wagon.
Yeah,
But,
there's
yeah.
there's a
That's been a big thing.
Not a saying, but just kind of an understanding in the music world that practicing 20 minutes a day every day for a week is going to get you better a lot quicker than practicing 2 hours one day a week. And it's because your brain has
Exactly.
time to digest what you're
little bit
doing.
every
It's
day.
fresh every time, and so it'll create habit and routine, and a lot easier. It's like when you're learning a language too, right? If you practice language for 15, 20 minutes a
Yeah.
day rather than trying to squeeze in all your Duolingo on Saturday morning, Yeah.
I do try to spread it out, man. I've been working hard to try and get my Japanese alphabet recognition back up a little bit more on a few sayings here and there, and just like that sort of daily thing where if I have a saying to myself or when I try to talk to myself, I do try to do it in Japanese if I can, just to brush up for myself, because I think Elliot's about the only person I know besides like maybe one of my sort of halfway acquaintances from college that know Japanese. And
Right.
I
It's
can
tough
even
to
try
find practice
with,
partners.
right?
You got to be very
So-
intentional about it. So, yeah. So, like, I'm noticing when I'm trying to force myself to get better with speaking the language dynamically, that just saying what I'm saying the answers to all the questions that I'm like, touch keying in as I'm doing them is like, that's good practice too, right? So, yeah.
Yeah. No, it's good,
Yeah.
man. I like Duolingo a lot. Language is a fun thing.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed y'all's
Yeah.
talk some of the other podcasts about language and where it comes from, and some of the concept you guys put about it being like a tool belt of phrases instead of like a full understanding of the syntax of the
Yeah,
language.
you
I
got
thought it
you
was
gotta
super
you gotta
interesting.
learn how to wave dash and no cancel before you can talk about the finer points of frame data, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, Yeah, you need to be able to input a wave
Exactly.
dash. Then you could talk about the
yeah.
fact that you're gaining, 2 frames with Fox's jump squad, and that allows you to get your Nair out 2 frames earlier, which allows you to be 1 frame before Falco's Shine comes out. You're like that, none of that matters until you know what that feels like. And again,
Right.
that comes
The
back to
practical
the point about
application.
blue collar people, right? They are just focusing on the practical utility
Right.
and the application and what it feels like to do this and put it together and use it, right? So, theoretics is kind of like it's also a metaphor to like primary and secondary economy to me. Like the theoretical type of stuff, upper management and concepts is like secondary economy. It depends on the primary economy to even exist. Without this, the primary economy of blue collar stuff, farming,
Yeah.
agriculture, real estate, manufacturing, production, like there is
Manufacturing,
nothing to
production.
theorize about without those things in place. But, with this on top, these people can kind of manufacture new ways for these people to operate that will generate results that maybe they wouldn't have found, because
Right.
I just really think that there's like different types of people that see problems
Yeah.
differently, and that these are 2 completely different types of people, right? This person's going to hate this job, and this person's going to hate this job.
It's those. So let them do their own things, work with each other, and
Yeah,
each
and
side make
ideally
the
we
other one's
don't,
lives a little bit
talk
easier.
shit about each other in the process, because we're shooting ourselves in the foot when we do that. So,
Exactly.
yeah,
It's sad. The whole
it's-
ego
it's-
class is set up. I don't know, man. We're
it's all
people.
baked into
We're all just
in
out
the
here in
academy
jungle.
to a
What's
pretty
the matter?
large degree, especially when you get into postgraduate studies. Like graduate and doctorate level studies, you start noticing more and more. Even if it's not an active, talking down on people. It's just kind of baked into the background, into their perceptions and their psychology, and you can tell it by the way they phrase things and what they prioritize. And it just kind of
Yeah.
began to grate on me more and more as I dug deeper into the academy. So,
Well, I bet you at some level, people who do go on to do those higher educations, right, to get the master's and the doctorate, start to see colleagues and friends and people from their graduating class or generation branch off and not do those things. And I imagine there's some little voice in the back of their head that goes like, am I wasting
Yep.
my time? Like, am I doing the right thing? Like, I'm doing all these
Yep.
years of education. Was this really the right choice? And maybe some of that stems from that, internal fear, right? It is like, okay, no,
Yep.
this makes me
I'm
important. This is good
credentialed. I
stuff.
have
know
training.
better
I
than
paid
other
money.
people.
I
And
invested
that's sort of like
time.
it's a
I'm worth more as a
self-validation,
human
right?
being now.
Exactly. It's a sunk cost fallacy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's sad. It's sad. But I'm glad, like I said, that I think a lot of that is not as on the surface anymore. I think people, through the internet and through connecting with people and seeing how other people live on a more like day-to-day level, I think at least people are coming around to the idea of a more humanitarian style thing where no one's really that much better than anybody else. We're all out here trying to make it work.
Yep.
Life is chaos at every side you look at it, and we're all just trying to make it
Yep.
out here. And I think that's the prevailing idea. Most people just keep their head down and don't say it, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I get that.
There's
impression off
there's
people
always going to be
more often than
infinitely
not.
more ground that you haven't explored or don't even know that you don't know than ground that you've covered, because we're
Exactly.
sitting here and we are literally like 1/1,000,000th or smaller the size of our respective cities, just in terms of surface area and mass, right? And then our city is literally like less than 1,000th, depending on what city you're in, but the size of your state, and then your state is one of 50 states, and that country is one of over 200 countries on the planet. The planet is the tiniest of billions of specks in just our solar system, let alone the galaxy, right? I think we can fit like something like over,
Right.
I'm going to make myself look so dumb, but at least like 500, 1,000 plus Earths inside the sun, right? And that sun can literally emit heat and light energy
minimum.
from 93 million miles away, okay? Steal a little bit from Michael Singer here, but if there's a fire in Miami and you live in Gainesville, up in the upper, or Pensacola on the upper side of that peninsula, right on the Panhandle, if there's a fire in Miami that burns the whole city down, you will not notice a single drop of that heat. But yet the sun is 93 million miles away.
Wow.
Okay, Gainesville is like Yeah,
and
exactly.
it's burning me when I'm outside. Like,
Yeah.
come on, man, that's some
just something
serious
that's just
energy.
happening all the time that we take for granted, right? And also,
Yep.
I'll have to show you this book. It's kind of incredible, just how much just physical gratitude you can have for your surroundings, just based on the way that chemistry and biology, specifically molecular chemistry, works, and how stars are created, and how the births and deaths of stars are literally like the iron that we have, that we're just making metals with, let alone everything that we have in our natural environment and what our bodies are made up of. And so it's, just kind of keeping things in perspective, I suppose, right? So, definitely good to have you on here. And, I imagine we'll be back on here to talk a little bit more about your, past your brewing life in a way pretty soon here. So I'm looking forward to that.
Oh, yeah.
And always good to have you on. Any closing thoughts you want to just mention, or anything you want people to check you out at, or anything you want to plug?
No, man, I'm a pretty private dude. I thank you a lot for letting me come on. It's been a great talk today. I love how, we've known each other, like you said, for years and years and years. And to think when we first met in middle school that this is where we'd end up one day is a crazy thought. So
going from Mega Man Battle Network 6 and cookies at the lunch table to, where we're at now.
Right. And Matazada Zapper.
Attack it twice, baby. So, indeed. Well, we'll be back on soon.